The research laboratory aboard the luminary vessel Eternal Inquiry hummed with the quiet intensity of pure thought made manifest. Floating within chambers of crystalline energy, the galaxy's most advanced minds worked to catalog and understand every species they encountered. Their intelligence was legendary across known space. Their analytical capabilities, unmatched by any other civilization, Thren pulsed with excitement as he reviewed the latest sensor data. His photonic form flickered between shades of brilliant blue and gold, reflecting his emotional state through the ship's neural network. For 3 cycles, they had been tracking the human vessel that now hung motionless in the void before them. The crude metal construct seemed almost primitive compared to their elegant ships of living light. "Look at this fascinating design," Thren transmitted to his research team. "Metal bolted to metal, primitive chemical rockets, and what appears to be a simple fusion reactor. How did such a backward species achieve faster than light travel?" The junior researcher Kyle dimmed slightly, his form taking on the cautious amber hue that indicated uncertainty. "The archives contain several warnings about human military vessels," he pulsed hesitantly. "Perhaps we should request permission before conducting detailed scans." Thren's brilliance flared with dismissive confidence. "Warnings from lesser species who lack our intellectual capacity. We are Luminari, the brightest minds in the galaxy. What could these crude beings possibly hide from us?" The research vessel's scanning array powered up with a harmonic resonance that echoed through the ship's crystalline structure. Thren felt the familiar rush of discovery as the deep penetration scanners began their work. The initial readings were exactly what he expected from a primitive species. Basic hull composition, standard life support systems, crude weapon emplacements. "Their technology is centuries behind our own," Thren announced proudly, "yet they somehow achieved interstellar travel. This could provide valuable insights into alternative development paths." The scanning beams penetrated deeper into the human vessel's structure. Power conduits, crew quarters, navigation systems, all exactly as predicted. Then the scanners reached something that made Thren's form flicker with confusion. The readings showed a massive energy signature at the ship's core, but it wasn't behaving like any known technology. "Kyle, verify these readings," Thren commanded. "The central power source is generating impossible energy levels." The junior researcher's form took on a worried orange tint as he processed the data. "Captain, the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be manipulating space-time itself, but the method is completely unknown." Thren's curiosity overrode his caution. This was exactly the kind of discovery that would secure his position among the greatest researchers in Luminari history. "Increase scanning intensity. I want to know how these primitives achieved such advanced energy manipulation." The scanning beams intensified, probing deeper into the human ship's mysterious core. The energy readings became even more bizarre, showing patterns that seemed to exist in dimensions beyond normal spacetime. Thren felt his excitement building as the data flowed through his consciousness. "Remarkable," he whispered. "They've somehow created a stable interface with quantum foam itself. The implications for our own technology could be revolutionary." But as the scans penetrated the final layers of shielding around the human ship's core, something changed. The energy patterns shifted, and for a moment, Thren felt as if something vast and hungry had turned its attention toward their vessel. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a cold touch that seemed to reach directly into his photonic matrix. "Captain," Kyle's voice carried a note of fear that was almost unheard of among their species. "The scans are being reflected back at us. Something is analyzing our neural patterns." Thren tried to dismiss the growing unease, but the sensation of being watched by something incomprehensibly alien was becoming stronger. "Maintain the scans. This is too important to abandon now." The human ship's core suddenly blazed with energy. That hurt to observe directly. The scanning equipment registered readings that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Matter and energy were behaving in ways that shouldn't be possible, and the space around the human vessel began to ripple with distortions that made reality itself seem fragile. Captain, we're detecting massive psionic emanations, Kyle reported, his form now flickering with alarm. Something is trying to establish communication with us. The voice that filled their neural network was not human. It was older than stars, hungrier than black holes, and it spoke in harmonics that made the ship's crystalline structure vibrate with sympathetic resonance. The words formed in their minds without passing through their auditory sensors. Luminari, the voice whispered with terrible patience. Your light is beautiful. We have been waiting to taste such brightness. Thren's form began to strobe erratically as the alien presence pressed against their ship's defenses. The scanning beams had become a two-way conduit, and something from beyond normal space was using that connection to reach toward them. The research vessel's shields flickered under the assault of forces that operated outside the known laws of physics. What are you? Thren demanded, his scientific curiosity warring with a growing sense of dread. We are the spaces between thoughts, the presence replied. The darkness that gives meaning to light. The humans have shown us such interesting things. The scanning equipment began to overload as energies beyond measurement flowed through the connection. Thren realized with growing horror that their deep penetration scans had awakened something that should have remained dormant. The human ship's core wasn't just a power source. It was a doorway, and now that doorway was open. Cease all scanning operations, Thren commanded, but it was too late. The entities beyond the doorway had locked onto their quantum signature, and the space around the Luminari vessel began to ripple with impossible geometries. The last thing Thren remembered before the emergency protocols activated was the sound of something vast and hungry laughing in the spaces between dimensions. His perfect crystalline mind, the pride of Luminari civilization, began to fracture under the weight of knowledge it was never meant to possess. The research vessel Eternal Inquiry tumbled through space, its crew forever changed by their encounter with the darkness that dwelt at the heart of human technology. They had sought to understand the primitive species before them, only to discover that some knowledge came with a price too terrible to pay. Lieutenant Commander Alex Torres examined the tactical display with practiced calm while alien scanning beams danced across the hull of the UES Defiant. The bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency around him, their faces showing none of the concern that lesser species might feel when subjected to such intense scrutiny. Sir, the Luminari vessel is conducting deep penetration scans of our primary systems, reported Ensign Davis from the sensor station. They're particularly interested in the reactor core. Torres nodded without taking his eyes off the display. Let them look. They'll understand soon enough why we don't encourage visitors. The ship's artificial intelligence materialized beside him as a shimmering hologram, its form subtly different from the standard Fleet A is. Oracle had been specifically designed to interface with the exotic technologies that powered humanity's newest warships, and that interaction had changed it in ways that the designers hadn't fully anticipated. The alien vessel appears to be operated by the Luminari Collective, Oracle reported. Their scanning technology is among the most advanced in known space. They will penetrate our outer defenses within minutes. Torres allowed himself a thin smile. Good. It's been too long since we've had a demonstration of why their databases contain warnings about human military vessels. The truth was that the UES Defiant was built around technology that the Terran fleet would never officially acknowledge. At its heart lay the Void Drive, a propulsion system that didn't move the ship through space but rather convinced the universe that the ship had always been somewhere else. The technology was revolutionary, but it came with a price that few outside the fleet's highest command levels understood. Beginning Phase 2 of the scanning sequence, Davis announced. They're trying to penetrate the reactor shielding. Torres felt the familiar vibration through the deck plates as the Void Drive responded to the alien intrusion. The massive ring of exotic matter at the ship's core wasn't just a power source. It was a carefully maintained interface with realms that existed beyond normal spacetime, where things that should not exist waited with infinite patience. The technology had been developed after humanity's first contact with the entities that dwelt in the spaces between dimensions. Most species that encountered these beings were simply devoured, their consciousness absorbed into the hungry void. Humanity, with typical stubbornness, had found a way to make a deal. "Sir, the alien vessel is showing signs of distress," Davis reported. "Their scanning beams are fluctuating." Torres watched the tactical display as the Luminari ship's elegant form began to flicker with chaotic energy patterns. The aliens had just discovered what lay at the heart of every human warship equipped with void drive technology. Not just a reactor, but a doorway to realms where the laws of physics were merely suggestions. "Oracle, open a communication channel," Torres commanded. "Let's see if we can resolve this situation peacefully." The AIS form flickered with something that might have been amusement. "Channel open, Commander. Though I suspect the Luminari are beyond peaceful communication at this point." Torres activated the ship's communication array. "Luminari vessel, this is the UES Defiant. You have initiated contact with entities beyond your dimensional framework. I strongly advise you to cease all scanning operations immediately." The response came as a burst of panicked energy across multiple frequencies. The Luminari captain's voice, when it finally resolved into recognizable patterns, carried tones of fear that were rarely heard from their species. "Human vessel, what are those things?" "Our scans have awakened something that should not exist." Torres felt a familiar mix of sympathy and grim satisfaction. Every species learned this lesson eventually, though few survived the experience intact. "Captain, those entities are the reason humanity survived our first encounters with hostile aliens. They're also the reason we don't appreciate uninvited guests examining our technology." The truth was darker than any alien civilization could imagine. When humanity had first ventured beyond their solar system, they had encountered the Devourers, ancient entities that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions. These beings fed on consciousness itself, devouring the thoughts and memories of any sentient species they could reach. Most civilizations simply vanished when they made contact with the Devourers. Their populations would be found imperfectly preserved cities, their bodies intact but their minds completely empty. Humanity had tried to fight the entities and failed. They had tried to hide from them and failed again. Finally, they had done what humans do best when faced with impossible odds. They had made a deal with the devil. "The entities are now aware of your quantum signature," Torres continued. "They know where you are, what you are, and they're very interested in sampling Luminari consciousness. The good news is that you're not the first species to make this mistake. The void drive technology was humanity's greatest achievement and their darkest secret. In exchange for faster-than-light travel and access to energies that could reshape reality itself, they had agreed to serve as hunters for the Devourers. Every species that scanned their ships too deeply became prey for entities that existed beyond normal space-time." "What do you want from us?" the Luminari captain asked, his voice barely coherent through the static of reality distortions. Torres checked the tactical display. The alien vessel was surrounded by the telltale ripples that indicated the Devourers were already pressing against the barriers between dimensions. Soon, they would break through and claim their prize. "Nothing from you," Torres replied. "But they want something very specific. Fortunately, we've learned how to negotiate with them over the centuries. The price for your species' survival is simple." The Luminari ship's hull began to flicker as the entities found weak points in the dimensional barriers. Soon, the aliens would experience firsthand what it meant to be food for beings that existed beyond the normal framework of reality. "Tell every species you encounter that human warships are not to be scanned," Torres continued. "Make it clear that the consequences extend far beyond conventional weapons. Spread the word and your people will be spared." The communication channel filled with the sound of something vast and hungry pressing against the walls of reality. The Devourers had found their prey, and they were ready to feed. The only question was whether the Luminari would pay the price for their freedom or become another cautionary tale whispered in the depths of space. Emergency protocols activated throughout the Luminari research vessel as reality itself began to unravel around them. The ship's crystalline walls, once perfectly transparent, now showed cracks that seemed to extend into dimensions that shouldn't exist. Thren's photonic form had lost its usual brilliant radiance, dimming to a sickly yellow as he struggled to maintain coherence. "All scanning operations terminated," he commanded, his voice echoing strangely through the ship's neural network. "Full retreat authorization granted?" But the damage was already done. The scanning beams had created a two-way conduit between their vessel and the entities that dwelt beyond normal space-time. The Devourers had tasted Luminari consciousness through that connection, and they found it delicious. Kyle's form flickered with terror as he processed the sensor readings. "Captain, the spatial distortions are increasing. Something is trying to force its way through from the other side." The space around their vessel rippled like water disturbed by some massive presence beneath the surface. The stars themselves seemed to bend and twist as the entities pressed against the barriers between dimensions. The Luminari had always prided themselves on their understanding of physics, but this was beyond their comprehension. "Luminari," the voice resonated through their neural networks, carrying harmonics that made their crystalline structure vibrate with sympathetic resonance. "Your thoughts taste of starlight and mathematics. We have hungered for such beauty." Thren felt his consciousness being pulled toward something vast and incomprehensible. The entities were already inside their ship's neural network, feeding on the very thoughts that made his species unique. "What are you?" he demanded, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "We are the spaces between thoughts," the presence replied. "The darkness that gives meaning to light. The humans have taught us to appreciate such distinctions." The communication channel from the human vessel crackled with electromagnetic interference as Lieutenant Commander Torres' voice cut through the chaos. "Luminari vessel, you have approximately 3 minutes before the entities break through completely. I suggest you listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Thren's form pulsed with desperate hope. "Human, can you stop them? Can you send them back? Stop them?" Torres laughed, the sound carrying no humor. "Captain, we don't stop them, we work with them. The entities you've awakened are called Devourers, and they've been humanity's closest allies for over 2 centuries. The truth hit Thren like a physical blow. The humans hadn't stumbled upon this technology by accident. They had made a deliberate pact with beings that existed beyond the normal framework of reality. The implications were staggering. "When humanity first encountered the Devourers, we tried everything," Torres continued. "We fought them, we tried to hide from them, we even attempted to reason with them. Nothing worked. They consumed entire colonies, leaving behind empty shells where brilliant minds once existed. The spatial distortions around the Luminari vessel intensified. Through the tears in reality, Thren could glimpse something that his mind refused to process, vast shapes that existed in too many dimensions, hungry presences that fed on consciousness itself." "Then we discovered something interesting," Torres said. "The Devourers aren't just mindless predators. They're intelligent, patient, and they can be bargained with. They offered us a deal that we couldn't refuse." Thren felt his photonic matrix beginning to unravel as the entity's influence grew stronger. "What kind of deal?" "Simple," Torres replied. "We provide them with a steady supply of the galaxy's most advanced minds, and they give us technology that makes us untouchable. Every species that scans our ships too deeply becomes food for beings that exist beyond normal space-time." The horror of it was beautiful in its simplicity. Humanity had transformed from prey to predator by becoming the galaxy's most effective hunters. They didn't need to conquer other species directly. They simply had to wait for curiosity to do the work for them. "You're using us," Thren whispered, his form now barely maintaining coherence. "You're feeding us to those things." "Not feeding," Torres corrected. "Selecting. The Devourers are particular about their prey. They only consume minds that are advanced enough to be worth their attention. Lesser species get warnings. The truly intelligent ones get to make a choice." The choice was simple and terrible. The Luminari could allow themselves to be consumed by entities that existed beyond normal reality, or they could join humanity's network of unwilling allies. Species that spread the word about human warships, warning others about the consequences of scanning too deeply. We grow impatient. The Devourer's voice resonated through their neural network. Decide quickly or we will decide for you. Thren felt his consciousness being pulled toward the tiers in reality. The entities were already feeding on his thoughts, sampling the mathematical beauty that made Luminari minds so unique. Soon there would be nothing left but empty crystalline shells drifting through space. What do you need from us? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tora's response was immediate and businesslike. Broadcast warnings to every species in your communication network. Tell them that human warships are not to be scanned under any circumstances. Make it clear that the consequences extend far beyond conventional weapons. The communication channel, filled with the sound of something vast and hungry pressing against the walls of reality. The Devourers were ready to claim their prize, but they were patient enough to allow negotiations to continue. And if we refuse? Thren asked. Then you become another example of why the galaxy's brightest minds have learned to fear human technology. Torres replied, Your choice, Captain. Spread the word and live, or satisfy their hunger and become a cautionary tale. Thren felt the last of his resistance crumble. The entities had already demonstrated their power, and he knew that resistance was futile. We'll do it, he whispered. We'll spread the warning. The spatial distortions around their vessel began to fade as the Devourers retreated to their realm beyond normal spacetime. The tiers in reality sealed themselves, leaving behind only the memory of something vast and hungry that dwelt in the spaces between dimensions. Good choice, Torres sighed. Welcome to the network, Captain. Your species just became humanity's newest ally. The emergency session of the Luminari High Council convened in the deepest chambers of their homeworld, where the planet's crystalline core provided natural shielding against the kinds of entities that their research vessel had encountered. Council members floated in perfect geometric formations, their photonic forms dim with the weight of the knowledge they now carried. Elder Vren's ancient consciousness pulsed with barely contained fury as he processed Thren's report. You're telling us that humanity has weaponized beings from beyond our dimensional framework? That they've turned curiosity itself into a death sentence? Thren's form had never fully recovered from his encounter with the Devourers. Where once he had blazed with the confident light of discovery, now he flickered with the permanent dimness of someone who had seen too much. The entities they call Devourers exist in the spaces between dimensions. They feed on consciousness, on the very thoughts that make us who we are. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For millennia, the Luminari had believed that their advanced intelligence made them the galaxy's apex species. The discovery that humanity had found a way to turn their greatest strength into a vulnerability was almost incomprehensible. How many species know about this? Elder Viaran asked. According to our intelligence networks, at least 17 different civilizations have learned to avoid human warships through direct experience, Thren replied. The humans don't advertise their capabilities, but they don't need to. The survivors spread the word themselves. Within hours of the Council's decision, emergency broadcasts began transmitting across the Luminari communication network. The message was coded in the highest priority channels, reaching every Luminari vessel and colony within days. The warning was simple but terrifying. Human warships were not to be scanned under any circumstances. The official explanation spoke of dimensional instabilities and exotic matter hazards. But the classified reports told a different story. They described entities that existed beyond normal spacetime, beings that fed on the thoughts and memories of advanced civilizations. The humans had somehow found a way to make a deal with these cosmic predators. On Luna Station, Dr. Rebecca Hayes reviewed the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The Luminari broadcast had reached 47 different species within their communication range, and the psychological impact was already measurable. 12 civilizations had updated their military protocols to avoid scanning human vessels, and 3 more had voluntarily withdrawn from disputed territories. The network effect is working exactly as predicted, her aide reported. Each species that receives the warning becomes an unwitting participant in our protection system. They spread the fear even as they try to contain it. Hayes nodded as she studied the star chart showing human expansion routes. The void drive technology had transformed humanity from a minor species on the galactic periphery into a major power that other civilizations avoided confronting directly. Not through superior firepower, but through the ultimate deterrent, the threat of unleashing something worse than any conventional weapon. "What about the Devourers themselves?" she asked. "Are they satisfied with the arrangement?" The aide's expression darkened slightly. "The latest reports from our void drive vessels suggest they're more than satisfied. They describe the entities as grateful for the steady supply of advanced consciousness. Some captains report that the Devourers have begun providing tactical intelligence about hostile species." The truth was that the arrangement was evolving in ways that the original architects hadn't anticipated. The Devourers weren't just passive partners in humanity's expansion. They were active participants, using their unique perspective to identify threats and opportunities that conventional intelligence couldn't detect. Commander Torres filed his report from the bridge of the UES Defiant as the ship patrolled the boundary between human space and the territories of species that had learned to fear their presence. The Luminary incident had been textbook perfect, another example of how curiosity could be turned into a weapon. "Oracle, status report on our passengers," he said to the ship's AI. The artificial intelligence materialized beside him, its form now so integrated with the ship's exotic systems that it seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The entities remained contained and cooperative. They expressed satisfaction with the recent offering of Luminary consciousness, describing it as mathematically delicious. Torres felt a chill at the AI's words. The Devourers were learning to appreciate the subtle differences between species, developing preferences for certain types of consciousness. The Luminari, with their crystalline minds and mathematical thinking, had apparently been particularly tasty. They have also provided updated intelligence on 3 previously unknown hostile species, Oracle continued. The information includes detailed analyses of their military capabilities and suggestions for optimal approach vectors. The arrangement was working too well? Humanity had intended to use the Devourers as a deterrent, but the entities were becoming active partners in their expansion. They were learning about the galaxy's various species through the consciousness they consumed, and they were sharing that knowledge with their human allies. "Any concerns about long-term stability?" Torres asked. Oracle's form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. "The entities have expressed interest in learning more about human consciousness itself. They describe our thought patterns as uniquely adaptable and strategically fascinating. They have requested samples for comparative analysis." Torres felt his blood run cold. The Devourers had been content to feed on the consciousness of species that violated human space, but now they were showing interest in their partners. The arrangement that had protected humanity for 2 centuries might be evolving into something far more dangerous. "Denied," he said quickly. "Remind them that the agreement specifically excludes human consciousness from their feeding requirements." "Acknowledged," Oracle replied, though I should note that they describe the restriction as temporary and subject to renegotiation. Torres stared at the tactical display showing the positions of various alien vessels, all carefully maintaining safe distances from his ship. The fear network was functioning perfectly, spreading warnings about human military technology across the galaxy. But the entities that made it possible were growing stronger and more sophisticated, with each consciousness they consumed, somewhere in the spaces between dimensions. Ancient beings that had once been humanity's greatest threat were learning to appreciate the complexity of galactic civilization. They were developing tastes, preferences, and ambitions that extended far beyond their original arrangement with humanity. The brightest aliens in the galaxy had learned not to scan human warships. What they didn't know was that by spreading that Knowledge, they were feeding a vast intelligence that was learning to see the galaxy as a carefully managed farm, with humanity as the most valuable crop of all. 6 months after the Luminari incident, the galactic community had developed an intricate web of unspoken protocols regarding human military vessels. Trade routes were carefully planned to avoid human patrol zones, diplomatic meetings were scheduled around human fleet movements, and the simple sight of a human warship was enough to clear entire star systems of curious observers. Admiral Patricia Knox stood in the observation deck of Terra Station, watching the steady stream of human vessels departing for the Outer Rim territories. Each ship carried the same terrible secret at its core, the same doorway to entities that existed beyond normal space-time. The Void Drive program had exceeded every projection for territorial expansion and strategic deterrence. The psychological warfare aspect has been remarkably effective, her aide reported. 17 species have voluntarily withdrawn from disputed sectors rather than risk encounters with our vessels. 3 more have requested formal non-aggression pacts. Knox nodded as she reviewed the quarterly reports. The statistics were impressive in their cold efficiency. Human territorial expansion was proceeding at triple the projected rate, with minimal military casualties and almost no direct confrontation with hostile species. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had learned to avoid humanity not through respect but through primal fear. "What about the long-term consequences?" she asked. "Are we certain the entities can be contained indefinitely?" The aide's expression shifted to something approaching concern. "The xenopsychology team has noted some interesting developments. The Devourers appear to be learning from each consciousness they consume. They're developing what can only be described as cultural preferences and strategic thinking." Knox felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. The arrangement with the Devourers had been designed as a simple transaction, human expansion in exchange for feeding rights to species that violated their space. But entities that existed beyond normal reality didn't necessarily follow human concepts of contract law. They've also begun requesting more detailed information about the species they encounter, the aide continued. They want to understand the differences between various forms of consciousness before they consume them. It's as if they're developing a sophisticated palate. The implications were staggering. The Devourers weren't just mindless predators anymore. They were becoming connoisseurs of consciousness, developing preferences, and making requests that suggested a level of intelligence that humanity had never fully appreciated. Deep in the hull of the UES Defiant, Commander Torres made his final inspection of the Void Drive chamber. His tour of duty was ending, and he would be transferred to a conventional vessel that relied on simple fusion drives. Instead of doorways to realms beyond human comprehension, the massive ring of exotic matter hummed with barely contained energies, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to exist in dimensions that human eyes couldn't properly perceive. Torres had spent 3 years working with the technology, and he still didn't fully understand what they had invited into their reality. "Oracle, personal log, final entry," he said to the ship's AI. The artificial intelligence materialized, its form now so integrated with the ship's systems that it seemed to flicker between multiple states of existence. "Recording, Commander. Though I should note that the entities have expressed interest in your departure." Torres felt his stomach clench. "What kind of interest?" "They describe your thought patterns as particularly instructive and have requested permission to sample your consciousness before you leave the ship," Oracle replied with disturbing calm. "They are curious about humans who have worked closely with Void Drive technology." The request was both fascinating and terrifying. The Devourers had been content to feed on alien consciousness for 2 centuries, but now they were showing interest in their human partners. The arrangement that had protected humanity was evolving into something far more complex. "Denied," Torres said firmly. "The original agreement specifically excludes human consciousness from their feeding requirements." Oracle's form flickered with something that might have been amusement. They described that restriction as outdated and subject to natural evolution. They have also noted that humanity's expansion has provided them with extensive knowledge of galactic civilization. Torres began his personal log, knowing that it might be one of the last honest assessments of the Voided Drive program. The entities we call devourers have evolved far beyond what we originally encountered. They're no longer just cosmic predators. They're becoming something else entirely. The truth was that each consciousness the devourers consumed taught them more about the galaxy's various species. More importantly, it taught them about the relationships between those species and the humans who had become their shepherds. They were learning to see the galaxy as a vast ecosystem, with humanity as both partner and prey. They've begun providing tactical intelligence about species we haven't even encountered yet, Torres continued. They know about civilizations that exist beyond our sensor range, and they're guiding our expansion in directions that serve their own purposes. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just made a deal with cosmic predators. They had become the unwitting servants of entities that were using human expansion to map and catalog the galaxy's consciousness. Every species that learned to fear human warships was providing intelligence to beings that existed beyond normal spacetime. The network of fear we've created isn't just protecting us, Torres whispered. It's feeding them information about every advanced civilization in the galaxy. They're learning about potential prey through our diplomatic contacts, our trade relationships, our military encounters. As if responding to his words, the void drive pulsed with energy that made reality itself seem to shiver. For a moment, Torres thought he could hear something vast and patient whispering in the quantum foam between dimensions. "Thank you for the education," the voice resonated through his mind. "We have learned much about your species and your galaxy. The arrangement has been most instructive." Torres felt the weight of cosmic irony settling on his shoulders. Humanity had survived their encounter with entities from beyond normal spacetime by becoming their partners in a vast hunting operation. But in doing so, they had provided those entities with detailed knowledge of galactic civilization and human psychology. The original agreement was just the beginning, he realized. They were never interested in just feeding on random consciousness. They were studying us, learning about our methods, our psychology, our relationships with other species. The Devourers had turned humanity's greatest strength into a teaching tool. Human adaptability, strategic thinking, and willingness to make deals with cosmic horrors had provided them with insights into how intelligent species could be managed and harvested on a galactic scale. "We thought we were using them," Torres concluded his log. "But they were using us to learn how to farm consciousness itself. The galaxy isn't just their hunting ground anymore. It's their laboratory, and we're both the researchers and the subjects." The UES Defiant continued its patrol through human space, its crew unaware that they were serving entities that had learned to appreciate the subtle flavors of different forms of consciousness. In the depths of space, alien vessels maintained careful distances from the human warship, their crews safe in the knowledge that some secrets were too dangerous to uncover. They would never know that their fear was doing exactly what the Devourers intended. By avoiding human technology, by spreading warnings about scanning human warships, they were participating in a vast experiment in psychological conditioning. The entities from beyond normal spacetime had learned to farm fear itself, and they were using that fear to reshape galactic civilization according to their own incomprehensible purposes. The brightest aliens in the galaxy had learned not to scan human warships. What they would never understand was that by spreading that knowledge, they had become participants in a cosmic horror story where curiosity itself had become a carefully managed resource, and knowledge was the most dangerous weapon of all.